Aloha, and welcome to Live at the Legislature, where every week we sit down with members of the House of Representatives to talk about issues, concerns, and legislation moving through the halls of the state capitol. And that will be the last time I will be saying all of that, at least for 2019. This will be our final episode for this season. Last Thursday, the House adjourned. We introduced 3,500 bills, passed out just under 300, but numbers alone don't tell the story of what's been going on here at the state capitol. Neither do the observations of political pundits and media observers who tend to judge a session based on high-profile bills passing or not passing. That's a narrow view of what goes on here. And so today I am joined by Representative Della Al-Belati. She is the House Majority Leader, and we'll be talking about some bills that were not controversial or sexy, but had an impact on the everyday lives of all of our citizens. Welcome. Thank you for joining us this morning.
Thank you, Carolyn. I also want to thank Olelo for giving us this opportunity to do Live at the Legislature, to talk to our residents about what's going on here. You are absolutely right. People often criticize the legislature, but they don't really have a full understanding of the whole gamut of bills that we pass and introduce. This session, the House started off really wanting to focus on cost of living issues. I think that's really top of mind of most people. Mm-hmm. And when you look at the bills that we passed, some of the quieter bills, some more high profile, you'll see that we really accomplished quite a bit. Let me start off with early education. We funded 18 Native Hawaiian early education classrooms that we're going to lose federal funding. So that's a very big investment in the future. We also put some funding towards SNAP Double Bucks program, which will allow those who receive SNAP funding to be able to use their monies to buy fresh produce in our farmers markets, which then goes back to our local farmers. So really keeping the money here in Hawaii as we double it up with federal funding and private partners. We've supported Community College Promise program, again, helping those who need it the most to be able to afford what we know is an expensive college education. And then those very same individuals, we've also supported HighNet, mm-hmm. which is going to allow those who do receive benefits as they're going to school not to lose those benefits. It will enable them to use their educational work hours as part of their work requirements so that they don't have to worry about putting food on their table as they're studying right. and improving their chances in life. There's so much, Carolyn, I can keep going.
Well, I'm going to ask you some questions too. But let's talk about the one thing that I did want to talk about is prison and bail reform.
Yes.
Now, you would think, well, that doesn't affect me, but it does.
We see the numbers of people incarcerated, and it affects some populations more than others. We know that there's a huge incarceration rate in the Native Hawaiian community, amongst Filipinos, amongst COFA migrants. So we know that it's hitting people and communities especially hard. I think the pretrial reform is going to help us get a better handle of who we know is cycling in the jails, who we know needs more assistance, so that once they have paid their debt to society, that they do have the supports outside so that our community is stronger. Mm-hmm. We also reformed asset forfeiture so that we can ensure that system isn't just money that's being held up, and it's not just cycling, amongst law enforcement, but really only affecting those who are convicted criminals.
Right. Okay.
So lots happening in prison reform.
Well, and let's talk about another reform area now, election reform.
That was another highlight. So we really focused in on the automatic vote recount, and some of that was generated from what we've seen in recent elections. We've also pushed up all-mail voting up to 2020, so we're going to see that. That's going to help us save money in the long run because we don't have to have all these centers open. We do have the safeguards that people can still walk in their ballots if they want, but we are also hoping that it's going to help us increase the numbers of people who are voting. We left some voting reforms on the table, things like automatic voter reform. But with every session, we have bills that we leave on the table that we want to come back to and revisit.
Yeah, that's something I wanted to talk about because we did, the House especially was very ambitious in a package of election reform, campaign reform, money and politics bills. Unfortunately, several of those bills did not make it through end of session. But let's talk about that, because they often focus on, well, you didn't pass half of those, or you didn't do this. This is governing and policymaking is not a sprint, it's a marathon, right?
It absolutely is a marathon. And for those government reforms, those campaign finance reforms, we know that the problem is out there of money in politics. So I'm certain that the House and the Senate will come back next year to tackle those issues. I want to talk about an area of bills that we did leave on the table that relate back to our priority of addressing the high cost of living. I know that there are people out there who are disappointed about minimum wage, paid family leave, the retirement savings account. But what we had this year was a very good discussion about all of those issues. And at the end of the day, those are employer mandates that are going to help, and we want them to help workers, but we really have to balance all of that. So I think all of those are going to come back next year as things that we're going to be able to talk about. Tax credits that were left on the table, other things. Our economic picture is getting a little hazier out there, so we also have to have that in the backdrop. But again, there's lots more to do. I know that the House has set some priorities for the interim. We had a chairs meeting on the very last day of session. As soon as we were done, we were already back at work, thinking about and talking about all of those things we're going to work on during the interim. So I am very certain that the House majority is going to come back with some good ideas, and hopefully some of the more challenging things also ironed out. We still have to have a discussion with the Senate. We still have to continue to have discussions with members of the public, with the administration, with the governor. All of these are a big package deal when it comes down to it.
Well, there have been reports in the media that first it was, the legislature was fighting with the governor. And then most recently, as we close, there was a story in the Star Advertiser that there was friction between the House and the Senate. I thought everything is moving along pretty well, actually. We accomplished a lot together, didn't we?
We did accomplish a lot, and I think what we have to remember is that democracy is a rough and tumble sport, and sometimes, yes, tempers flare. We kind of bump elbows a little bit, but at the end of the day, I think we saw, the governor joined the State House on the floor on Sinai Day, the last day of session. Mm-hmm. We worked very well with the Senate on putting together funding bills that addressed things like the needs of Big Island and the disaster recovery, or Kauai and their continued recovery from the floods from last year. So, yes, again, it's like what we talked about. Political pundits want to focus on the criticism. They want to focus on the areas of conflict. But at the end of the day, we are all working towards making this place a better place for Hawaii's residents, and we do that. It's not always going to be perfect. No. Again, tempers will flare sometimes, but that's okay. We're all big boys and girls here, and I think it's really about doing the people's work here.
Well, they do call it. That's why they call it democracy. In the few remaining minutes that we do have left, I do want to touch upon homelessness and affordable housing. Last session, we passed historic legislation in those two areas. Talk a little bit about that, but more importantly, what we did this year that was maybe not as sexy or glitzy.
So we recommitted funding to that whole slew of homelessness programs, addressing the state rental supplement program, housing first, rapid rehousing. So we continued our commitment and put more monies, or the same amount of monies and a little bit more, towards those programs. Mm-hmm. In the area of affordable housing, we really have to exercise our oversight as a legislature to make sure that the HHFDC, the Housing Corporation, is really moving forward with the projects, because they're overseeing the management of those tax credits that we put out last year, as well as making sure that there's projects coming up of affordable housing developers who are going to build the housing that we need, not simply the housing for the top 1% of the community. So we're exercising our oversight. The House did pass the Aloha Homes study to look at the ideas that have been put forward by the Senate. Mm-hmm. That was a bold idea. I think it fits for Singapore because they have a very different form of democracy than we have. They don't have as many environmental regulations as we have, and that's for good reason. We want to protect our pristine environment for future generations. So we had different considerations. The House didn't turn that away. We're looking at it through a study, and we're going to come back and continue to address issues of homelessness and affordable housing.
And talking a little bit about, again, I think the legislature passed a bunch of clean energy, clean transportation bills that we should be very proud of.
So on the horizon, we know that transportation is undergoing transformation. We're going to see more autonomous vehicles. We already see cars that can park themselves. If you
Better
don't like
than me.
Exactly. I don't like to do that back-end parking. So what we're going to see is more conversation about how can we get clean transportation. That means more electric vehicles on the roads, more hybrids. How are we going to restructure our infrastructure so we have the charging stations throughout the island system and on all islands? This means both Oahu as well as the neighbor islands, because their infrastructure needs are different. We're going to see condominiums and mixed-use retail places needing to have charging stations. So we're well on our way for clean energy.
And then I wanted to, we've got 59 seconds left. Now this year, if you had 10 new representatives, 9 Democrats, 1 Republican. Based on my observation, it was a diverse, outspoken group. They weren't afraid to make their opinions known and get charged. How would you assess their first session?
You know, in my estimation, we had a very good group of freshman legislators. Good questions. They brought interesting ideas to the table. I think they pushed members to think about communities at large, looking at ways that we can be fiscally responsible. We had some really good bills coming out. You know, I want to give a shout out to Representative Scott Watayoshi. You know, we have that gift card bill.
That's right.
If you have if you have less than $5 in a card, you're going to be able to redeem it from a retailer. If the governor does not veto that, that bill.
And governor, do not veto that. We all have gift cards that we have 5 cents on. Thank you for joining us again, Representative, and thank all of you for being with us live at the legislature, and God willing, we will see you next year. Aloha.